This is basically a class to teach you guys how to use the Revit software. Revit is an example of BIM software. BIM is an acronym for Building Information Modeling. And this is the first video in this series. I'm simply going to show you in this video how to start a new project and introduce you to the interface. Over the sequence of these videos, we're going to construct a house inset into a hillside, and this will kind of introduce you to all the basic functions you need to get up and running and creating projects in Revit. When you first double click on the Revit software, this window will come up. What I want you to do is go over here to Projects, and we're going to say New. We're going to open a new project. When this window comes up, New Project, for Template File, we want to go to the drop-down and say Architectural Template. Architectural Template sets things up in feet and inches. And then down here, Create New Project is highlighted by default, and we'll hit OK. And this is what we see when we open a new project. We've got really three different things that we're looking at. We're looking at a ribbon along the top of our screen, which has the various tools that we'll be using for Revit. We've got these two windows here on the left side of our screen that inform us as to all the various properties of the things that we'll be using in Revit. And this window here is called Project Browser. This allows us to see the various images of our project that will be created in Revit. When you open a new project, it already sets up by default several floor plan levels, ceiling plan levels, and elevations. These are simply camera positions. If you didn't know, Revit, the way Revit works is you create a virtual model of your structure, and then you can slice it apart and put cameras in there, and all the views produced by your section cuts or by your cameras you can simply drag and drop onto formatted title block sheets, and rather quickly you've got a set of construction drawings so your building can be built. I'll go over this really quickly and just introduce you to where you can find things. And I neglected to mention this third area here. This is the drawing area itself. This is where we will be making our model. And what we see here are four little boxes with pointers on it. These are cameras. These are our elevation cameras. So if we construct something right in the middle here, if this is where we begin our model, we already have cameras pointing from the north, from the south, from the east, and from the west, producing our elevation views. So what we want to do is just kind of take a look at some of the functions here along our top toolbar ribbon. We've got these various tabs up here that you can click on. The first one here is Architecture. We'll be using this probably the most. This is where you can find pre-created wall types that you can put into your model, pre-created door types, windows. Components are any kinds of furnishings or appliances, vehicles, people, anything that you want to put into your model that is already pre-built by someone else. These are shortcuts that can make your life really easy. Columns, we can put columns in our model. Roof, we construct a roof, we construct ceilings, floors. And the neat thing is, as you hover over each of these items, a little explanation will come up. So if you ever get lost, you can just hover over something and find a little explanation as to how these work. We can put stairs in, ramps, handrails and railings for our stairs, custom curtain walls, customized patterns of mullions on our windows. We can really make any kind of customized building that we want to in Revit. So all these pre-made building component parts are found under the Architecture tab. The next tab over is Structure. We won't use these so much in this class. These are structural components, beams, columns, load-bearing walls. These are things that maybe a structural engineer might use. When you use Revit in a real professional job, it's entirely possible that consultants on the job Structural engineers, interior designers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing consultants all can work on your same model simultaneously, adding in their parts of the project. The next tab over is systems. Again, this is not something we will be using much over the course of this semester, but this is if you needed to add in HVAC ductwork, air terminals on your ceilings, conduit, that sort of thing. You could find that under systems. The next tab over is insert. Insert gives you the ability to insert other computer file types into your Revit model. Probably a lot of the first professional Revit projects you will be doing will start off as AutoCAD projects. Someone in your design firm will create an AutoCAD floor plan, and at that point it will be decided to make this into a Revit model. You would use insert to insert your AutoCAD floor plan right here onto our ground plane, and it just comes in as a like a flat drawing on the ground, and you would simply pull the components up, extrude up walls, and then start adding in floors and ceilings and windows and doors. Insert is also great because you might want to insert a SketchUp model into your Revit model. This tab here, Insert, gives you the ability to bring in SketchUp models into Revit. Also, we've got images that could be brought in. In some cases, you might want to bring in a customized JPEG to apply to walls or floors, or maybe even bring in artwork for some future project. That could be brought in using the Insert tab, and we'll get to that at a later point in time. The Annotate tab, an annotation is simply a note that goes into your set of drawings. So any kind of text calling out things, calling out materials or furnishings, dimensions are considered a form of annotation. They're a note. Any kind of tags, symbols would fall under the annotation category. So when it comes time to add any kind of notes, you would use this tab. Analyze, this is kind of if you got to the point where you needed to determine square footages for certain regions in your model, you could use the Analyze tab. And that's kind of an advanced tab. We won't get to that just yet. Massing and Site. In some cases, you might be building a house or a building on some kind of unusual topography. You can actually create the topography in Revit, and we'll be doing that on our first tutorial project. We're going to build a house inset into the side of a sloping hill. So we'll make up some topography and put that in. Site components, you might want to show in a landscape plan the location of trees and hedges and that sort of thing. Those are pre-made components that we could easily bring in from this command. But that's found in Massing and Site. Collaborate, we're not going to worry too much about. That's working in conjunction with other consultants. View, anything that pertains to how you're looking at your model. Sometimes you might be working in a plan view. Sometimes you might want to see it in 3D. Sometimes you might want to put in section flags or elevation views. Anything pertaining to how you see your model or improving the visual information of your model can be found under this View tab. The Manage tab, I primarily use this in conjunction with this Materials command. At a later point in time, we'll add specific materials to our surfaces in Revit, especially for when it comes time to doing photorealistic renderings of our space. We can put cameras in our model and render those three-dimensional images in a realistic way to show to clients. And this command here, Materials, allows us to tell the computer what the various materials we're seeing really need to look like. So that's under the Manage category. Add-ins, we're not going to worry about that too much. The last category here is Modify. Modify has a bunch of commands in here that if you're an AutoCAD user will look familiar. These are commands that allow you to do things like copy items in Revit, join walls in Revit, rotate things, move things, align things, make an offset copy of things. We can measure things. We got a little tape measure here. And we can mirror things, mirror and make copies of things. All the stuff that you traditionally do in AutoCAD to manipulate the various lines in your drawing can be found in Revit under the Modify tab. One thing that a lot of students have problems with is sometimes they'll open up Revit and some of these tabs or some of these tools seem to be missing. And I'm not sure why Revit is set up like that, but if you ever find that your tools along the top here are missing, they haven't gone away, there's a little arrow here that if you go to the, it's two arrows right up here. If you go to the right arrow, you can hit this cycle through all command, and if you ever find any of your tools are missing along this ribbon, just kind of hit cycle through all and then go to, you can hit this left button and it kind of will cycle through all the various appearances of how these tools can show up on your tool ribbon. So if you ever find that you're working in Revit and suddenly you don't see any of your tabs or tools, hit the make sure cycle through all is checked, and then go to the left button and just kind of hit it a few times until your tools reappear in the way that you want to see them. It's just a customization feature. Like I said, when you create a new project in Revit, down here on the project browser, it creates a whole tree of information. Default levels are set up. Default elevation camera positions are set up. Anytime you need to go from one view to another, you'll use this project browser, and we'll get to this in the next video here. So that's pretty much the commands and kind of where to find things. A couple other things I want to go over before I conclude this particular video. We've got a little command up here, and if you hover over it, like I said, an explanation will come up. This one is called thin lines, and you can toggle this thing. You can turn this on and off. By default, this thin lines command is turned off when you create a new project. If you have it turned off, the way it's set up by default, when you start creating walls and floors and things, you'll see them with really thick, heavy outlines. And sometimes when you zoom in, those thick outlines can impede what you're trying to see. What I like to do right off the bat is click this button. I activate this. Now all the lines will be thin and will appear thin on your monitor, and you can really zoom in close and see what's going on. It just improves your visibility. It doesn't make line weights go away when these drawings are printed, but it simply makes it easier for you to see things on your screen when you zoom in close if you have the thin lines command turned on. When it's turned on, it'll light up blue like we're seeing right here. The other thing that I tend to do right off the bat when I start a new Revit project is I'll go down to these little icons here at the bottom of my view window, and I'll go to this one. If I hover over it, it's called Detail Level Course. By default, it just looks like an empty rectangle. If you click on that, this kind of pop-up window shows up, and we've got three options: coarse, medium, and fine. This pertains to the resolution and the amount of detail that we see in any particular view that we're working in. This only applies to the given view that we're working in. What I'll do is any view I'm working in, I always like to set this for fine. If you set it for fine, now we'll see our little rectangle has kind of like a hatch pattern in it. That just means that the level of detail that we're seeing in this particular view shows absolutely everything that you want to see. If we were drawing walls in a plan view and we had the coarse setting set, we might see outlines representing the outside face and the interior face of the walls, and that might be it. When we set this for fine, we'll actually it will turn on the various hatches for the various materials that comprise the wall. I like to see as much detail as I can, so in all my views I turn on the fine resolution. I think the reason Revit is set for the coarse resolution to be turned on by default is simply the more resolution you show, the more memory it's taking up at any given point in time. But I've never had any kind of memory problems on my computer just because I have the fine resolution turned on at any given moment. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover here. The last thing I'll show you is just we've got a command here called modify. It just looks like an arrow. Anytime I'm done with one particular command, placing things or joining things or moving things or copying things, I always want to click on this modify command here. That just ends the particular command I'm working in. That will stop the computer from making copies or rotating things or adding things or modifying things. That just tells the computer I'm done with a specific command that I'm working in. Okay, this kind of concludes our first video. Just gives you a little introduction to where to find things. Oh, as an afterthought, sometimes these two windows here will get closed out. You can see there's an X on each of these. You might accidentally close your properties window, or you might accidentally close your project browser window. Don't worry when that happens. To bring them back, just go to View, because this pertains to views. These are things we want to see. Go to View, go over here to User Interface, and click the drop-down menu, and we just put the check marks back in the boxes that we want to see. So if I put a check mark in Project Browser, this comes back. If I go to User Interface and I go to put a check mark in Properties, this comes back. And so they're back where you want them to be. All the time, people inadvertently close these things, so that's how you bring those back. Okay, that concludes our